All right, let's be real. Are you staring at that developmental psychology textbook, feeling that final exam breathing down your neck? Well, don't panic. You've come to the right place.
Forget the all-nighter. Think of this as your 5-minute high-speed study guide. We're going to cover the absolute must-know concepts of cognitive development in middle childhood so you can walk into that exam feeling confident.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off at the classic, Piaget. Then we'll jump to the modern brain as a computer idea. After that, we'll get into practical memory tricks you can literally use tonight, see how this all applies to reading, and wrap up with individual differences and intelligence. Let's do this.
First up, the guy you are guaranteed to see on the test, Jean Piaget. We're focusing on his big ideas for what's happening in middle childhood.
Okay, so for kids between 7 and 11, the magic term is the concrete operational stage. This is a huge deal. It's when their thinking stops being kind of random and starts becoming logical. But, and here's the detail you need for the exam, it only works for real, concrete stuff they can see or touch. Thinking about abstract concepts like justice or algebra, that's still a little ways off.
And check this out. It's a perfect example of one of those new logical skills. It's called seriation, just a fancy word for being able to line things up in order, like these sticks from shortest to longest. A 7-year-old can nail this because their brain can now juggle multiple ideas at once. Okay, this stick is shorter than that one, and that one is shorter than the last one. It's a massive cognitive upgrade.
Now here's the update, the part that shows you've done the reading. Piaget thought these changes happened all at once, like flipping a light switch, but modern research shows it's way more gradual. He also thought these stages were universal, happening to every kid at the same time. We now know that's not quite right. Culture, and even just a little training, can change when a kid masters these skills. That comparison right there, that's a classic exam question.
Okay, so we've covered Piaget. Now let's switch gears to a more modern take on all this, the information processing view. The big idea here is to think of a child's brain like a computer that's getting more and more powerful.
This simple diagram basically sums up the whole approach. You've got information coming in, that's your input. The brain's hardware and software, the processing and storage, go to work on it. And then you get an output, like remembering a fact or solving a problem. From this point of view, getting smarter is all about making this whole system faster and more efficient.
So what's actually going on under the hood? Well, the brain is getting some serious hardware upgrades. You've got myelination, which is like insulating the brain's wiring so signals travel faster. And then there's pruning, which gets rid of connections we don't need anymore. All this leads directly to what we can see on the outside. Kids who can pay attention longer, think faster, and hold more information in their head at once.
Let's zoom in on that working memory because it's super important. Using Baddeley's model here, you can think of the central executive as the CEO of your attention. It's the boss, telling your brain what to focus on. It manages these different information buffers for things you see and hear. It's basically the RAM for your brain. As the system gets better, kids can start juggling way more complex thoughts.
Okay, so their cognitive hardware is improving, but how do kids, and let's be real, how can you actually use this to remember things better? Let's break down the strategies.
All right, pay attention, because this is your toolkit for studying. First, you've got rehearsal, just repeating stuff. It works, kinda. Better is organization, grouping concepts together, like putting all the Piaget stuff in one mental folder. But the gold standard, the best one, is elaboration. This is when you actively connect the new stuff to things you already know. That is how you get information to stick for the long haul.
And the thing that pulls all of these strategies together is this concept, metacognition. It literally just means thinking about your own thinking. It's that little voice in your head that says, I don't really get that last part. I should probably read it again. For you, right now, it's knowing which of these topics we're covering feel solid and which ones you need to review before the test. Getting good at this is the secret to studying smart, not just hard.
All right, let's see how all this theory actually works in the real world. A better working memory, new strategies, metacognition, how do they come together? Well, there's no better example than learning to read, which is one of the most complex things a human brain ever does.
Look at this chart. See that critical jump happening there in stage 3? Kids go from learning to read, which is basically just sounding out words, to reading to learn. Now they're actually using books to get new information about the world. And that huge leap, it's only possible because all those cognitive systems we just talked about are finally up and running.
So this leads to a huge debate in education. What's the best way to actually teach reading? You've got the whole language camp, which says kids learn best from reading interesting stories. Then you have the phonics camp, which says you have to start with the basics, teaching letter sounds first. The big takeaway for your exam? Most experts now agree that the best approach is a balanced one that uses a little bit of both.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. We've talked a lot about the typical path of development. But of course, in reality, it's a lot messier. Kids are different. So what happens when cognitive development doesn't follow the textbook?
First, let's get a key definition down. A learning disability is not about being unintelligent. That is a huge misconception. It's a very specific difficulty in one academic area, like reading or math, in a child who has normal intelligence and is developing just fine otherwise.
Dyslexia is the most common learning disability, and these examples really show what it's like. It's so much more than just reversing letters. It can be swapping whole words like saw for was, leaving letters out, or having trouble connecting sounds to letters, like spelling circuit as set kit. These aren't careless mistakes. They show a real difficulty in processing the sounds of language.
And this isn't just a behavioral thing. You can see it in the brain. This image highlights the key language centers. Brain scans show us that when people with dyslexia are reading, these areas of the brain just activate differently than they do in typical readers. There's a clear biological basis for it.
This brings us to the bigger topic of intelligence and IQ tests. So, how much do they really matter for school? Well, here's our answer. A moderate correlation means, yeah, there's a connection between IQ scores and grades. But it also means that a huge chunk of academic success comes from other things, like motivation, good study habits, or just having a supportive family. An IQ score is part of the picture, but it's definitely not the whole picture.
And because of those limitations, a lot of theorists have said, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's more to being smart than one number. You've got Gardner, who proposed all these different kinds of intelligence, like being musically smart or physically smart, and Sternberg, who argued for 3 types, the analytical smarts that IQ tests measure, but also creative intelligence and practical intelligence, street smarts.
So, if you remember one thing for your final about intelligence, let it be this. It's super complex. It's a mix of both your genes and your environment, of nature and nurture. And no single test, no single number can ever capture the full picture of what a person is capable of.
And there you have it. Your high-speed review is done. You know how thinking gets logical, how the mental computer gets its upgrades, and how we learn something as complex as reading. So I'll leave you with one final metacognitive question. Now that you've just reviewed the science of how we learn, what's one strategy you're going to use to study for this exam? Think about it. Now, go crush that final. Good luck.